Hi everyone. I talked to so many of you today, so I got a bit tired. I took a nap and now I'm here to resume the lecture. And I would suggest everyone to take nap whenever they are working or studying. It is so good. So let's go back to section 3 and see what's going on. The first topic that we can see here is dynamic system approach. It just says that infants going through different stages for understanding their environment, they will do exploration and they will do selection. What is exploration? It means like infants try many responses and just try like different random uncoordinated stuff to just understand what's going on, for example, with their toys, with their food. I guess you know what I mean. Like sometimes they're just tapping their spoon to the plate and just make a mess with their face and their hands. It is totally random and it is totally uncoordinated. The next step gonna be selecting between that kind of random stuff and doing their best to understand what actually works better between that kind of random uncoordinated hand movements. To be more specific, for example, they are just tapping the spoon all the time, but they would select that maybe tapping is not working and maybe just putting the food in their mouth might be a better option. So from now on, like after a moment, after several trials, they would decide to select that kind of action to just feed themselves, and that's how they are learning. Um, so, what can be motor development in childhood? I bet some of you guys are really familiar with that kind of motor actions. We have like three of them here, but there are more. The ones that I want you to remember is these three because they are so important. For example, locomotor movement or walking, running, jumping, hopping, skipping, and climbing. They are so important. Manipulative movements, such as, let's say, throwing, kicking, catching, striking, and dribbling, they are important too. Stability movements or body control relative to gravity, like bending, like rolling, they are also important. We're going to talk about all of them now, especially stability one. But let's move on and talk about perceptual development. So, perceptual development can be divided into sensation, perception, and attention. Sensation is detection and discrimination of sensory information. Perception can be interpretation of senses involving recognition, and attention can be selectivity of perception. Like, for example, they're gonna again pay attention to one of those aspects and they wanna just go for one of them selectively after some time. I do have a question for you. From talking to you, I noticed that some of you guys, for your test, just focused on the study guide and you didn't consider the book because you thought that if you would just go over the study guide, you can just do your best in the test. This is not the case. First of all, a study guide is just some points that would most likely to be in the exam. And addressing each bullet point in the study guide takes a lot of time. Like each bullet point gonna be like 2 pages, honestly, which demands, or maybe more than 2 pages sometimes, because it depends on the bullet point that I'm actually mentioning. And they are just some cues for you to what to expect and not get surprised during your exam. But like in general, whenever you are just looking at a section or listening to my lecture, try to go back to the book, add some notes, either to the lecture, like in the PowerPoint, or somewhere separate, and try to answer the questions like that to just see if you literally understood like the whole concept or not. For example, majority of our questions in test one was about the battle between nature and nurture. And here again, we are just going back to the same concept because like development is just all about whether this is biology or whether this is environment, and maybe this is both. Like depending on the problem, depending on the situation, one of them or maybe both of them might win. So we have to just have a good understanding of those battles. So here, for example, this question is just very informative. It's just asking that how nature and nurture can just help you to just understand the ability to just understand like different objects and have the ability to just distinguish in between them. For example, infants can just from beginning recognize mom's face, right? Like they literally know that this is mom. Or from the fetus time, they actually know that this is mom's voice, or they are familiar to dad's voice. So is it like biology or it's like nurture? So just actually try to read the book, try to go back to the lecture, like previous section or this section, and answer these questions. Sometimes there might not be a right, clear answer. Like because it is psychology, everyone has different perspective. But just trying to investigating and exploring and brainstorming can help a lot. So another point is about how we can address a question, like a research question, or how we can just assess one research question in infants. Because basically they cannot talk, they don't have that much advanced motor skills. Just measuring their behavior is just so hard because literally they're sleeping all the time. Sometimes they might be fussy, they wouldn't just listen to mom, or they wouldn't just feel comfortable. Um, in the experimental situation. So how we can just measure different conditions. The most common method is habituation, and this habituation in which presenting a stimulus to the infant until there would be no reaction to that stimulus, and like another, then we're just adding another stimulus to the scene. For example, if I wanna see that how infants paying attention to a specific toy, like what toy might be better for them. First of all, I would just habituate them to one toy, okay, like one common toy. For example, I would just put their favorite toy in the room and just make them to play with that. We all know that after like some minutes, they're gonna used to the new situation, so it's gonna be habituation. Then I would add like two new toys, whatever it is. Then I would see how child, like infant, would interact with these new toys. Like, is it like looking? Is it like moving hands and legs? Or is it like, for example, yelling, screaming actually, or is it like crying or something like that? Because there are the ways that infants actually showing their emotions and attention. Another point that we can consider whenever we are just comparing two toys, which kind of be a cross-sectional design, is which toy might be more attractive for the kid, and that toy has what kind of criteria. So if we want to just measure them, if we want to just understand their perceptual development, all the time we can use habituation and dishabituation. This method can also help us to understand how they would hear, see, smell, taste, and feel. Another important point about perceptual development is haptic perception, in which is about touch sensitivity. We already talked about like how newborn are sensitive to touch, how it is important, especially for NICU babies, those who are in the hospital all the time and they do have like some problems in the beginning, how there should be some parent-child bonding and how moms should just, or dads, they should touch the baby even when they are in the hospital, because haptic perception is just very important. It can increase sensitivity threshold, and it can help to develop perceptual development in children. Another point is the smell. Babies are kind of sensitive to understanding the smells in the environment. They do some facial expression whenever they don't like the smell, and we can just understand that. Same goes for taste. They prefer sweetness. They don't like bitter taste, and we can understand and measure that from their facial expression again. Another one is maintaining balance or vestibular sensitivity. This actually is about body posture. Newborn can just actually manage their body posture. They can just understand how to pose from front to back, from up and down, and from side to side, right? Even if they would be a bit behind, there are some practices that can be helpful. Like if you can see that your baby is just a bit behind, there is a way to just actually simulate them and make them to just be more sensitive to a specific stimuli. Hearing. So we already talked about prenatal hearing. They are really sensitive to mom's voice. They do have preferences for familiar stories. For example, if you would tell a story to your baby, to your unborn baby in the prenatal development, they show some sort of reactions showing that they actually heard that story before. How we can just measure that again, we can habituate them with some sort of pacifier. Like they have a rate for sucking that pacifier, and when they are just hearing a familiar story, a favorite one, they would actually suck the pacifier faster.